Hello there, sword friends. I have some cleaning to do today, and while I was doing it, I thought I would take you along, not necessarily for the cleaning journey, that's boring, but I thought I would show you one of my favorite swords, maybe my favorite sword, in terms of artistic coolness, at least the fanciest sword that I own, and that's this one right here. It's a blade made by Anthony DiCristofano, mounted up with antique fittings and done up by the man in black, whose work you're probably familiar with at this point if you watch my channel. The thing to note about this one is I did buy it secondhand. I didn't commission the blade, but it was made, to my understanding, based on some specifications of the previous owner, and it's a real nice fancy sword. I don't use it, and there's some things that I like and don't like about it, but honestly I really like the overall shape. I like the skill of the craftsman that went into it. All of the welds and the folding that I'll show you in a moment are really tight and clean, and overall it's just a fantastic sword. I like the way it feels, I like the way it moves. The handle may be a little long for me personally, but all of that stuff I could change. This is one that that I think is pretty special, and frankly one that I think in terms of American smiths is probably about as close to Japanese style craftsmanship as I think any American guy gets. A lot of times I don't get folded steel blades, or if I do, they don't have the same kind of Japanese aesthetic, or the shapes tends to be maybe a little off. This in my mind is about as close as it seems to get to the real deal, which I think is the objective of Mr. DiCristofano, but I've never really spoken with the man. I guess I don't know. This sword is just one of my favorites, and I thought I would share it with you. Anyway, I'm not gonna cut with it or use it or share much of anything other than just some glamour shots of the blade and whatnot itself. So I think these are refinished or redone antiques, though I guess I'm not 100% sure on the Fuchikashira, since they do tend to have at least a more modern look. They could be antiques, but I'm pretty sure the Suba and Minuki are. You can see it's wrapped in Lomin Tsunami, I think is what this is, or maybe it's actually suede. Underneath there are large nodule bits of Samegawa that have been etched in such a way that the lacquer or whatever gets in between the nodules and really accentuates the size and quality of the skin. The Minuki here, tough to make out, but they are antiques from my understanding. If I show you on the other side here, again, antiques. The diamonds are nice and crisp and clean. I like them. Again, here's our Fuchi. Transitions and all of that line up like you would hope on a custom sword. Now, this Fuchi right here is one I just don't know if it's an antique or not. It's been obviously restored if it is, or it's in great condition. But the Suba, from my understanding, is an antique. So it's an old piece. Interesting shape, but not a lot of intricate detail or anything like that. But still, a pleasant antique for what it is. The sai is done up in this kind of red brick Ishime finish. It has a mixture of black and red in it, and it has a very pleasant look. The man in black is kind of known for this look here. I think he calls it the red brick, and it has very interesting, from a distance it kind of blends into one color, but if you get up close there's plenty of fun, interesting texture to see here. It's also pretty smooth, so it doesn't catch on anything obi-wise. It's not smooth like gloss would be, but smooth enough to the touch. So this is the Kisaki of the blade, and you can see it has a pretty wild hamon. Hopefully this light is bringing out some of the cool details here in the hamon. The thing I want to point out though is that this polish is really, at least in my mind, not suited to this blade. The blade is of a higher grade than the polish is, and I've always teetered on the idea of sending it off to get a little better polish done on it, something that would bring out some of the details a little bit more. But in this particular light, you can certainly make out some of the metallurgical effects happening here. Alright, this is the 11th time that I'm trying to record this, and my camera is driving me up the wall. So forgive the angry tone of my voice, but I'm about to shit myself with frustration. I don't know why one would shit themselves with frustration. Anyway, the point is, it's very difficult for me to get the camera to stay focused on these small details here. But what you can see and make out is there are some metallurgical effects, some darker spots, some lighter spots along this straight line. And there's a name for them, I can't recall what they are. But one thing I'm not a fan of on this sword, and has less to do with Mr. DiCristofano's work and more to do with whoever polished the sword, is you can really not see a lot of activity in the surface of the steel. There's not a lot of folding pattern on here, but if I move up the blade just a little slightly, you can make out some of that folding pattern. It's very difficult for me to hold the sword steady and get this to come out. The camera wants to not participate focus-wise. Anyway, you can make out a lot more of that detail in this area here. The hata seems to be quite a bit more bold and pronounced, and I bet if I were to have somebody repolish this sword and put more attention to the finer details, those qualities would be pretty consistent across the sword. In some spots it's just absolutely stunning. I really like the way it looks. Again, in here you can make out a lot more of that activity, some of the darker, lighter spots. Underneath there's a pretty wild hamon that just isn't as zazzy as it could be, as I'm so fond of saying. And the Kasaki, again, just I don't think it's done to the level that this sword warrants. But that doesn't change that this sword is absolutely stunning. This spot right here is about the only spot that I can see on the sword where the welds are arguably not as tight as they could be. If I look on the surface and if it stays focused, you can see that it doesn't really have a whole lot of depth. But this is about the only spot where the sword is not as smooth or as tightly welded as it could be. Overall, that seems to be a common thing in these really hand-forged blades, is you can make out a lot of spots where the welds don't take, and most of these are absolutely perfect. There's not a space or pocket or anything anywhere on this sword, and given how it was made, that is very impressive, especially with some of these metallurgical effects. They are just so pretty. There's a lot to appreciate in this sword, and I think it would be easier for me to see with again a fresher polish. In terms of shape of the sword, I just really like the overall shape and execution of this blade. It is a fantastic looking object. You can make out the signature here. Finish quality on the Nikago. Alright, sword friends, that's all I have for you. I was breaking this out for cleaning and just thought I would share some of my favorite features on one of my favorite swords. There's some things to really love about this sword, and basically the foundation of this sword, what the swordsmith did, is my favorite part. The artistry and the hamon, the hata, the shape is all things that I think are top notch, and I really couldn't ask for anything more on. That said, the polish is something that I think I might have redone at some point. The mount as well, as much as it's functional and good, it's not quite bespoke to my taste, as much as I like a shorter handle and swirly mitsudomes all over the place. So at some point I might do either of those two things, but the foundation of this sword is one that I think is really top notch. I'm a big fan of Anthony DiCristofano's work, even only having held a few examples of his piece. This isn't the only one that I've seen, but every one that I have seen certainly has artistry and character to it. The man is a very talented swordsmith, and I'll put links in the description down below to what I can find. I don't know if his website is still up. I don't know if he's still forging. I do know that his pieces come up for sale very rarely. That said, if you're lucky enough to own one, or you have any other information, throw it in the commentary down below. It makes for fun conversation. Anyway, that's all I have for you. Those are my thoughts on this sword. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. As always, cheers and thanks for watching.